Ukraine's unmanned systems forces sent 20 fiber-optic FPV drones after a 50-vehicle Russian convoy on the Pokrovsk front, and lost the element of surprise before the drones even left the ground. Russian artillery had already located the launch position. Over the next 13 minutes, the crews kept flying while shells searched for their bunker, and Russia's own jamming system ended up blinding its own air defense network. 2 drones made it through anyway, struck an ammunition truck and a fuel tanker, and turned the column into a bottleneck of burning vehicles that blocked the road Russia needed for its next push. It started at 03:27 local time on August 12, 2026. The 20 drones lifted off and accelerated toward the convoy at roughly 90 miles per hour. The control team had no idea Russian gunners had already found them. The first 152mm shell, fired from a 2S-3 Akatsiya self-propelled howitzer, landed 600 yards from the bunker, close enough to fill it with dust. What gave the position away wasn't the launch itself, it was heat. All 80 motors across the swarm had to run at full power to lift the extra weight of the explosive payload, and the copper windings heated up fast enough for a Russian infrared camera to pick them up from 8 miles out. The Ukrainian commander had 2 options: abort and try again later, or push through while artillery zeroed in. Reaching the convoy would take about 13 minutes. Russian gunners needed roughly 4 to correct their aim. They chose to continue. A BMP scouting ahead of the column spotted the swarm first and opened up with its coaxial 7.62mm PKT machine gun. The formation broke apart instantly. 5 drones climbed, 5 dropped low, 5 peeled left, 5 peeled right. Then all 20 kept swapping positions inside a shifting diamond, so the tracer fire kept cutting through empty air. What the BMP gunner couldn't see was the thin fiber-optic cable trailing behind each drone, carrying video and control signals directly to the operator. No radio link meant no exposure to Russian jamming, even though the electronic warfare units below were already pushing out heavy interference. Ukraine had run this kind of strike before, and they'd planned around exactly what was coming. The crews weren't packed into one bunker. They were split across 4 positions, arranged in a diamond and spaced 850 yards apart, connected by trenches so personnel could move between them under fire. That spacing wasn't arbitrary. A 152mm shell has a lethal radius of about 300 yards at 550 yards distance, so even a direct hit on one bunker wouldn't touch the others. Russia could destroy 3 of the 4, and Ukraine would still have a working position to fly the mission from, with all 20 drones still in the air. The second shell, fired from a 2S-19M Memsta-S, landed 550 yards out, still ranging fire, but closer. Through the lead drone's camera, the commander could now see the full target area, nearly 50 Russian vehicles pulling out of their staging area onto a roughly 1.5-kilometer stretch of open road with almost no tree cover or hard positions on either side. Ukraine had watched this exact route for days and marked it as the weak point. From the moment the first vehicle entered that stretch to the moment most of the convoy cleared it, there was a window of about 95 seconds. At that moment, the third shell hit near the trench system, and shrapnel cut 4 of the fiber-optic cables at once. 4 screens in the bunker went black, then flickered back on backup radio. A 5th drone lost its cable a different way, snagging its spool on an obstacle mid-turn while dodging BMP fire. Ukraine still had all 20 drones flying, but now 15 were on fiber and 5 were exposed on radio, right as Russian gunners were closing in on the trench itself. The commander ordered the crews to cut power, grab their gear, and move to the 4th untouched bunker. A shell landed on the position they'd just left. Russia had to start over on the coordinates. The 5 radio-linked drones didn't have long. A Borisogledsk II electronic warfare vehicle, riding with the convoy, picked up the swarm and started jamming every channel it could reach. Control links, video, backup frequencies, satellite navigation. On the 15 fiber-optic screens, nothing changed, since light pulses moving through glass at roughly 200,000 kilometers per second don't care about radio noise. On the 5 radio screens, video broke into blocks, latency spiked, and control inputs started disappearing. One drone lost its feed and hit the ground. A second drifted off course before dropping its link. The last 3 tried to hold on to backup channels, but the closer they flew to the jammer, the worse the connection got. Within moments, all 5 were gone. From the Russian side, it looked like the Borisogledsk II was breaking the whole swarm apart. Inside the Ukrainian bunker, 15 video feeds were still perfectly clear, and the range to target was down to a few miles. There was also a side effect Russia hadn't accounted for. By lighting up its jammer to fight the drones, the Borisogledsk II had just revealed its own position, and it had done nothing to slow the 15 fiber-optic drones still closing in. Rather than go quiet, the crew pushed the jamming harder. Within about 4 seconds, 4 more drones lost their video to interference and drifted off their flight paths. But 11 kept flying clean, and the Russian EW crew, unable to tell which of those 11 were even using radio, widened the jamming across every band tied to navigation, comms, and control. That decision backfired. The convoy's own tactical radios started losing signal in the same interference. The Borisogledsk II was trying to blind 11 targets that weren't using radio at all, while accidentally jamming the communications of the vehicles it was supposed to protect. The lead BMP crew spotted the 11 drones through thermal optics and tried twice to warn a Panzer S-1 positioned ahead of the column. Both calls dissolved into static. The air defense system still had its cannons and missiles ready to fire, but it had lost the early warning it needed to use them in time. With 10 seconds before the drones cleared its firing angle, the BMP gunner swung his turret and opened up with the PKT, which fires at 850 meters per second and roughly 800 rounds a minute. At that range, the drones were fast enough and unpredictable enough that any lead point he calculated was outdated before he could pull the trigger. They kept climbing, dropping, and cutting sideways every few seconds. 10 seconds passed, none of the 11 were hit, and the swarm moved past the BMP's effective angle and kept closing on the convoy. The next layer of defense had already found them. From roughly 4 miles out, the Panzer S-1's radar started picking up the low, slow-moving dots, though ground clutter made the small radar signatures hard to separate from background noise. The crew switched to electro-optical and thermal tracking instead. The Panzer carries twin 2A38M 30mm autocannons with an effective range of about 3 miles and 1,430 rounds of ammunition between them, capable of a combined rate of fire near 5,000 rounds per minute. Rather than aim at individual drones, the gunners swept the cannons laterally to build a wall of fire in front of the swarm's flight path. It worked. 3 drones went down in quick succession. 1 lost a rotor, 1 caught fire mid-air, 1 hit the ground. 8 remained, and they didn't stay grouped. 2 climbed, 2 dropped, 2 split left, 2 split right, constantly trading positions to rebuild the diamond shape. The Panzer gunner had 4 separate approach angles to track at once. The high pair was easiest to see against the sky. The low pair blended into ground heat and dust, but had the shortest run to the convoy. Forced to pick, the gunner went after the visible high group, which meant the low and flanking drones kept closing almost unopposed. The Panzer had just proven it could kill drones. It had also just shown Ukraine exactly where its attention would go. By the time the twin cannons swung back down toward the low group, the 8 drones were already hugging the ground at about 75 feet and closing at close to 90 miles per hour, changing elevation too fast for the gun crews to track cleanly. PKT fire, 12.7mm rounds from a cord machine gun and 30mm bursts kept sweeping the formation, but the drones never held a straight line long enough to be hit. They crossed the Pantsir's best firing window and dove for the convoy. That's when the column broke. The lead vehicles accelerated to clear the open stretch, while the trucks at the rear reacted slower, opening a gap between the front and back halves. 4 drones peeled off toward the slower rear section, needing under 10 seconds to close the final 1,200 feet. They dove almost together, and the first explosions among the rear vehicles forced the rest to brake hard and scatter off the road. The remaining 4 drones kept pushing forward, still under fire from the Pantsir, until heat buildup in the gun barrels forced the crew to briefly cut their rate of fire. That 10-second gap was enough for the 4 survivors to slip through, though by then their batteries were down to somewhere between 9 and 11%, drained faster than expected by low-altitude flying and constant maneuvering. None of them had enough charge left to return to base, even if they wanted to. The explosions at the rear helped the survivors in a way nobody had planned for. Smoke and dust from the burning vehicles drifted across the road and blurred the background the Pantsir's cameras were using to hold a track. Thermal imaging could still pick up heat, but a small target moving low through layered smoke was much harder to keep locked. The 4 drones vanished into that smoke under 1,000 yards out, then reappeared close enough that their cameras could pick out door handles and fuel drums on the vehicles ahead. At the same time, their fiber-optic spools were running out after 13 minutes of flight, kilometers of cable dragging behind them across trenches and rough ground, one more snag away from snapping the link entirely. Battery and cable were both nearly spent. The convoy was scattering. There was no time left to pick the perfect target. At 0340, the last 2 drones entered their final dive, one locked onto an artillery ammunition truck stuck in the traffic jam. At under 150 yards, with the battery down to 2%, the operator stopped making corrections. Every extra input just burned power that was needed to finish the run. The drone struck the side of the truck, and its shaped charge collapsed into a penetrator jet, moving at several miles per second, punching through the cargo compartment wall. Inside, the ammunition needed only enough heat to start a chain reaction, and within seconds, a secondary explosion tore the truck apart. The final drone hit a fuel tanker a few vehicles away, carrying thousands of liters of diesel. Diesel doesn't normally ignite just because a tank is punctured, but the impact atomized it into fine droplets that mixed with burning metal and hot air from the first explosion. Within a second, a fireball engulfed the middle of the convoy. The blast from the ammunition truck shattered windows and threw fragments across the road, while the ruptured tanker kept feeding fuel into a fire that was getting hotter by the second. Vehicles at the front kept fleeing. Vehicles at the back had nowhere to go, boxed in by the wrecks ahead of them and the terrain on either side. In the Ukrainian bunker, the video feeds went dark one after another as the last 2 drones struck. No aircraft remained in the air, but outside, the secondary explosions kept going, ammunition cooking off in waves and burning fuel tracing along the road. What had been a 50-vehicle mechanized column was no longer a functioning formation, and the route Russia needed for its next push was now blocked by its own wreckage. Which part of this actually decided the outcome? The fiber-optic drones that couldn't be jammed, the Russian EW system that ended up blinding its own side, or the convoy getting trapped in its own bottleneck? Drop your take in the comments. If you want more breakdowns like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.